Ashes of Creation's node system is looking exceptional, but for me, there is one massive risk with it, and that is not really for the players, it's for Intrepid, because if they don't get it right, then I think the game might feel a little bit underwhelming. Let me explain, let's jump in. In my opinion, the node system in Ashes of Creation is potentially truly groundbreaking. And if it works, it could really revolutionize how we interact with the game world. However, if it does not work as intended, it could end up alienating the average player. Now, I'm not 100% sure if any game really has done a similar node system. The one that I'm aware of is something like the EverQuest Next game. Now, that game never actually materialized, but what they promised was something similar to what Ashes of Creation is promising with its node system. The idea would be that if there was an area where you were killing sort of like a lot of goblins, then maybe a giant goblin would come and sort of avenge the other goblins, and the world that you create on your server would be different from another server. Now, that was intended to be the case in EverQuest Next. That game got cancelled and never actually materialized. Now, the node system in Ashes of Creation sort of feels a little bit bigger than that. Its basic intent is to create a dynamic world that is shaped by the players themselves through this node system. So the way this works is on the total world map, there are around about 85 nodes, and these nodes will go through different phases. They might start out as really small camps, and then they might work their way up to be metropolises. But one important thing is that not every node can become a metropolis at the same time. I believe it's estimated that there will be approximately 5 metropolises at any given time. Alongside them, you might have sort of like mid-tier towns, but the world simply cannot accommodate more than 5 metropolises. So these 5 metropolises, they might be in any of the 85 nodes, and that's going to be different from server to server, and it's possible that these will grow and shrink over time due to sieges, due to other reasons. But it might be that what was once a big city somewhere on your server, a year or so later might not be, and it'll be somewhere else. And these nodes are going to be different styles, so they're going to be based on different races. I think whichever race sort of like did more resources to grow that node is going to mean that that town will take on that kind of appearance. So if it was a lot of dwarfs, then it would be a dwarven area. Now, I'm not using the official names, but I'm just sort of, shortcutting. Now, you might be thinking, which is what I was initially thinking, what benefit does this have to the average player? So as a player, you will contribute to what node you are actually working at. So if you're completing quests at one node, then you are helping it grow, which is all well and good, but how does that benefit you? In theory, each node is going to provide different content. If node 23 is a metropolis, then depending on the type of node it is, and I'm not really going to fully explain this, but they can be divine, economic, military, or scientific, then the type of quests and the content available from that node is different from if it was node 45 that was a different type of node. The quests will change, and it might be that some of the content will change, maybe some of the world bosses will change, etc. Some players will also actually engage in the government of the node. Who gets to do that is sort of determined on the type of node that it is. For example, militaristic ones are going to be fighting over it basically, but the economic nodes are who spends the most amount of money and wants to buy it essentially. Now, I don't mean this video as a guide, but I'm aware that I'm providing some information that honestly, it might be wrong. I've checked the wiki, I've tried to fact check it. Whenever I do these kind of videos, inevitably somebody's like, oh Jay, they said in a live stream that this isn't the case. Look, let's ignore the specifics and try and concentrate on the holistics here a little bit, okay? The whole node system though is to try and drive this player driven world. It's going to be unique over time, and it's going to be unique per server. The content that you experience, the quests that you experience are going to be different, and you're contributing to the world in that way as well. Honestly, it's a truly exciting system, and if done right, will provide content for a very long period of time. It might be that your server currently has node 23 as being the metropolis, but it might be that there's another group who says, I actually don't want it to be that node. Let's do everything we can to get rid of that one and make our own over here in this style doing these kind of like content. Now, whilst all of that will get shared online, I'm really excited about that discovery period as well. I've no idea if that's going to be an alpha or not. Let's not delve too much into that right here. As exciting as the node system is, there is a bit of a risk with this. If it's underwhelming and doesn't really deliver on the promises, then it might be a completely worthless feature for the majority of players, and that would be a true travesty. A lot of people believe, myself included, that it's going to be predominantly large guilds that have the impact on where these nodes are, the running of them, and things of that nature. And that's perfectly reasonable, right? If you have a big coordinated group, they're the people who are going to control big coordinated efforts. The key risk is that there's not really an impact for the players who aren't in those groups. Or at least if there is an impact, it can't be an inconvenience, it actually has to be a positive one. So for example, imagine having a house in a metropolis that gets defeated and downgraded, and you get kicked out of the metropolis and you have to go find a new home. That sounds like a frustrating experience. But if there were benefits to being there and you enjoyed your time there, then you might look at it as an opportunity to find somewhere else to engage in, settle down, do those quests and help in that sense. As I said earlier, there's around about 85 nodes. Are those nodes going to provide unique enough content for them to actually be fully differentiated? Are the quests that are at node 5 going to be that different from the quests that are at node 35 once they get progressed higher up? Is the content going to be different? If you look on the wiki page for nodes, it is very, very, very long. I mean, just the index and the contents page is quite significant. There's so many different elements to it. It could be that the system is just too complicated to an average player and they're never really involved and they find it more of a frustration. As somebody who's been playing New World for the last couple of years, when that game launched, it had not a node system, let's be real, nowhere near as complicated or as good as a node system, but it had a system where each town basically had these stations. Now, these stations were for professions, and let's say you wanted to be a chef, then a cooking station could be like tier 2, 3, 4, or 5. If you were in a town, you wanted to do your cooking in one of the towns, but the tier station was actually quite low, it meant at the time that you couldn't craft certain items there and you had to take all of your stuff and go somewhere else. Now, New World has sort of fixed that by just making it so that that's not the case. They created a bigger incentive so that you wanted to have every station to be at max, and they made it so that a lot of the crafting wasn't dependent on the tier of the station. They made it more casual friendly, just to be clear, which I think worked for New World, but Ashes of Creation is sort of built on some level of inconvenience. I just worry that for the majority of the players, the node system might be more inconvenient than fun and enjoyment. A world that is unique to your server and special to just the community that you have together with all the people on your server sounds amazing. But if the impact of that world isn't really felt on a fun level, then it becomes a little bit redundant. You know, you're probably going to be getting taxed in a node if you actually do stuff there. But if you're not the one really benefiting from that in the bigger picture, then you might just feel a little bit frustrated from that. Again, that's something that New World had experienced. The node system seems like it's going to be truly exceptional, but I worry that it's only going to be controlled by the elite, and your perspective on it, your interaction with it, might be a little bit underwhelming. I mean, I didn't even really fully explain the node system here. There's vassal nodes, there's taxes, there's policies, there's citizenship, there's elections depending on what type it is, there's housing. It's going to be one of the drivers for wars, alliances, there's going to be commissions that players set up at each node. It's a truly vast system. The two questions we have is, will it be fun? And then how many people are going to actually be directly involved? Everybody will be indirectly involved because you'll want to level up your professions and that kind of thing, and where you do so will contribute to the growth of the node. But will you be involved in a fun way? That's the key question, and I think the key risk of this system. It's so vast, it's so important. For me, it's one of the flagship things that Ashes of Creation offers, and I think they need to get it right. Otherwise, I think a lot of the game might simply just fall flat on its face. Obviously, we don't know the answer to some of these questions. What we do know is that it's going to have some kind of functionality in Alpha 2. We should actually be able to interact with the node system. So let's see how it plays out there. And we'll find out if my concerns are valid. For now, have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.